Hello everybody, welcome to this month's webinar on WhatIf Analysis in Excel. My name is Adam and I've got the fantastic Deborah Ashby on the line as well, who's going to be teaching us all about WhatIf Analysis today. Before we start and before I hand over to Deb, it's just a couple of quick announcements and sort of house rules as well. If you've got any questions or anything like that, pop them in the chat panel down at the bottom. I'll be answering questions. As always, there will be a recording of this. So if you've registered for this webinar, we've got your email, and in the next couple of days, you'll be sent a recording. I'll try and get that out tomorrow to everyone who attended. And just a couple of things on courses. So we've launched a couple of new courses on Simon Sez IT and StreamSkill recently. One of them is Microsoft Teams, done by our very own Deb Ashby. That's now live on the site, and it's a fantastic introduction to Teams and how to use it. Of course, lots more people moving on to Teams at the moment as the number of people working remotely increases. So if you're one of those and you're struggling to get to grips with it, then there's a course there to help you through it. The next course we've released, and this has just been released a few days ago, is our Power BI course. So if you are looking to take your data analysis skills and your sort of charting, dashboard, presentation type skills up a notch and go beyond Excel, Power BI is really the next kind of most sensible tool you can go for. It's a Microsoft tool, and it allows you to create some really stunning dashboards and things like that. So take a look at that as well. And finally, the next course we're working on at the moment is our Windows 10 course. So we do already have a Windows 10 course, but it was done 2.5 to 3 years ago, and Microsoft since then have changed a lot of things on Windows 10. So Devs is currently steaming away through that course right now, and we've actually decided instead of just doing updates, we're just going to start from scratch because quite a bit has changed. So that'll be a brand new Windows 10 course coming out as well, and I'm been looking through bits of it, and I'm learning stuff despite having used Windows 10 almost every day since it came out. So hopefully that will be useful to you guys as well. Right, I won't say anything else. Any questions, or if you need me, just ask in the chat. If you're having any issues, sound issues, viewing issues, anything like that, best thing is normally to log off and log back in again. This webinar software tends to work best in Google Chrome or Firefox. You sometimes have issues if you're in Internet Explorer and things like that. So just keep that in mind. But over to Debs.
Lovely. Thank you, Adam. Hi, everyone. Very warm welcome to today's webinar on WhatIf Analysis. Just to echo what Adam was saying there, I hope everyone is doing well from wherever you're joining us from today. And as he also mentioned, he will be on the call the entire way through to answer any questions that you might have regarding the logistics of this webinar. If you have any questions about the content as we're going through, if you just make a note of them, and I will leave some time at the end, and I'll try and take as many questions as I can within the allotted time. So let me just very briefly introduce myself, because I know that not everybody is a regular to our webinar. So my name is Deborah Ashby and I'm a Microsoft IT trainer. So I specialize in the design, delivery and facilitation of all things Microsoft, both in the classroom and online. And if you can't already tell by the accent, I am based in an extremely warm London, England. We're having some freakishly high temperatures today, which makes not being able to go outside all that more annoying. But nevertheless, we are here. We have a webinar to amuse ourselves with for the next hour. So the topic today, what if analysis? Let's take a look at our agenda. So if you've never heard of or never even used WhatIf Analysis tools before, I'll just briefly explain what they are to you and why they might be useful. But I will say, with these tools, the easiest way of understanding how they work and what they are is just really to see a demo. So we're going to try and get into that as quickly as possible. I'm going to start out with the PMT function. Now, that isn't a what-if analysis tool. It is a function that's available in Excel. But the PMT function does work really well with what-if analysis. So we're going to throw that in at the start. You get to learn an additional function if you don't know how to use that, as well as what-if analysis. So that can't be bad. 2 for 1. We're then going to go through 3 examples of using the goal seek tool. I'm then going to show you how you can work with Scenario Manager. And then we're going to delve into the wonderful world of data tables, 1 variable data tables and also 2 variable data tables. And then we're going to finish out the session by taking a look at how we can use the Solver add-in. And I will say that this is an add-in. So when we get to that section, I'm going to show you how you can install that into your Excel. For a lot of you, you might not automatically see Solver within your Excel. It's not something that you have to download from a website. It is available. It's just a little setting that you need to turn on within Excel. So I'm going to show you how you do that when we get to that part. So let's just start out very briefly with that first question. What is what-if analysis? Right, so we're talking about what-if analysis. So what-if analysis is basically the process of changing the values in cells to see how those changes will affect the outcome of formulas on the worksheet. Now, as I said, I can sit here and explain it to you, but it's really not going to make much sense until you start seeing some examples. Now, before we get into that, I just want to show you where your what-if analysis tools are located. Now, you'll find them on the data ribbon in Excel. And if you look over in the forecast group, you should have an option there for what-if analysis. And you can see there I have 3 of my tools: Scenario Manager, Goal Seek, and Data Table. Now, there is a 4th, as I mentioned, that is the Solver. And I have that over here in my Analyze group. I have my Solver sitting up there. Now, as I said, unless you've installed the add-in, you're not going to be able to see that. So when we get to Solver, I'll show you how you can very quickly install that add-in. All right, let's start out by taking a look at Goal Seek. Now, in order to demonstrate this, I want to start out by just completing this little table here using the function called PMT. Now, if you've never used PMT before, this is a financial function. So if we jump to our formulas ribbon, you will find it located under our financial group just here. If I scroll down, there it is just there. And basically what it does is it calculates the payment for a loan based on constant payments and a constant interest rate. So what we're going to do first is I'm just going to complete this PMT calculation, and then I'm going to show you how it works with Goal Seek. So let's take a look at our data in this first little table at the top. Now, we're going to imagine the scenario that I want to buy a new car, and I need to borrow $24,000 from the bank in order to do that. And the bank are going to lend it to me at an interest rate per annum of 3.5%. And I'm borrowing that money over a term of 60 months. So what I basically want to work out here using that PMT function is how much my payment is going to be each month with these criteria. So we're going to use the PMT function. So I'm going to type in equals. I'm going to type in PMT and open my bracket. Now you can see underneath I have my arguments. So the first argument this function requires is rate. So looking at my table above, you can see here is my rate, cell B3. Now one thing you have to be aware of here, if you're working out a monthly payment, it means that all of your input has to be monthly. So this rate is per annum, so per year. So what I need to do is do divided by 12 to get that rate per month, comma. It's then asking me NPER. So this basically means the number of payments. So that would be the term. Now that's split down into months, 60 months, which is essentially 5 years. So I'm good to just enter in B4 as my second argument, comma. Finally, I have PV. Now that stands for present value. So what is the loan amount essentially? So it's cell B5. Now you'll notice that there are two other arguments there, FV for future value and also type, but those arguments are in squared brackets. Now, if you ever see arguments in squared brackets, it means that those are optional. Now, in this particular scenario, I don't need those. I'm good with what I have here. So I'm going to close my bracket, enter, and it tells me that I'm going to be making a monthly payment of $436.60. Now, the thing you'll notice here is that it's showing in red, it's showing as a negative value. So the formatting I have for negative values is that they show up in red and they're in brackets. Now, the reason why it shows as a negative is because it sort of thinks that this is the money that's coming out of your account. It's negative to you, essentially. You're going to be paying this amount of money. Now, if in this spreadsheet I didn't particularly want this to show as a negative, I could go back into my formula, and then just before B5, so just before this loan amount, if I type in a minus and press enter, it's going to turn that into a positive value. All right, so that is the PMT function. We're going to be using it a couple more times in other examples. Hopefully that makes sense. So now let's move on to how we can use goal seek in order to make a change to this formula. So looking at this, I'm saying to myself, okay, so my payment is going to be $436.60 every single month, but I've actually budgeted for $500 a month. That's how much I can spend. So I'm going to use goal seek to tell me how much more I could borrow if I was paying $500. Okay. So I'm going to jump up to the data ribbon. I'm going to go across to WhatIf Analysis, and I'm going to select the Goal Seek option. And this is a very simple little utility. The first thing it asks you is to set the cell. So I want to set this cell to 500 because that's how much I can afford. And what do I want to change? Well, I want to borrow more money. So I want to see how much I can borrow if I can pay $500 a month. So I'm just going to select the loan amount cell and click on OK. And you can see there very quickly, it's telling me if I pay $500 a month, I can borrow $27,485. Okay. Now, similarly, I could do that on a different cell. So let me just cancel that so it goes back to how it was. If I go back to WhatIf Analysis and back down to Goal Seek, again, I'm going to say set this cell to 500, but this time I want to see, let's see how many months I can pay that over if I'm paying $500 a month. So I'm going to select this cell instead and click on OK. So if I'm paying $500 a month and I'm still borrowing just $24,000, it's only going to take me 52 months to pay that back. Okay, so that is kind of how Goal Seek works. Let's use it in a different example. Let's scroll down. Now here I have something slightly different. So we have some test scores here. So let's just pretend these are test scores for a student. And you can see all these different scores for these different subjects. Now the student has to get an average score of 80 in order to pass all of their classes with a grade A. Now, they haven't yet sat their English literature test, but as the student, I want to know what the grade is that I need to get in order to pass with an average of 80 across all subjects. So the first thing I'm going to do here is I'm going to say equals, I'm just going to work out the average. So average, open bracket, I'm going to highlight all of these cells, including that blank cell. I'm going to close my bracket and hit enter. Now, in order for Goal Seek to work here, you need to put just any old number in here. So I'm going to say 100. And then I'm going to use Goal Seek to work this out. I'm going to go up to WhatIf Analysis. I'm going to go down to Goal Seek. And this time I'm going to say, set this cell to value 80 by changing this cell. Okay, so this cell has to have a value in it in order for Goal Seek to work, which is why you kind of need to enter something in there if the cell is blank. So if I click on OK, I can see here that to get an average of 80 across all of my classes, I only need to get a score of 64 in my English literature exam. All right, Goal Seek in two different examples. Let's take a look at one more example of goal seek. Now here what we have is just a table, and these are employee names. We've got the department that they reside in, their employment status, so whether they're full-time, contract, so on and so forth, their hire date, the number of years they've worked there, their salary, their job rating, and then their new salary. So currently, everybody's got a 2.7% increase. So all of these salaries have been increased, and that's what gives us that new salary number, the increase of 2.7%. Now, if I jump down by doing Control down arrow to the bottom of this list, you can see here that the total for all of those salaries is 2,418,042. Now, I've been told that I have a budget for all staff salaries of 2.5 million. So I'm currently just under budget. So what I want to do is I want to increase all of these salaries so that I hit my 2,500. So I can use Goal Seek to do this as well. So again, if we go down to this cell just here, I'm going to jump up to WhatIf Analysis, and I'm going to go to Goal Seek. And I'm going to say set cell H52 to value, and I can never remember how many zeros I need. Let's scroll up. And there we go. So I'm going to set it to 2500000. I always get that wrong, so I like to make sure what I'm doing is correct. So I want to set that cell to 2.5 million by changing this increase cell here, because this is going to feed through to these formulas. And when I click on OK, there we go. It's increased those salaries. I can see the salary increase is now 6.2%. And if I scroll down, it's now exactly 2.5 million. All right. So GoalSeek really helps you just kind of put what it is you're looking for, and then it will adjust some of the other calculations to show you how you can essentially get to that point. All right. So a really useful little tool. So that is our 3 examples of utilizing GoalSeek. Let's move on to our second WhatIf analysis tool, which is the Scenario Manager. So we're going to jump across to our next spreadsheet. Now, again, this is a fairly simple example of how you can utilize scenarios, and you can come up with all different weird and wonderful ways to use this. But I think this is probably one of the simplest ways of explaining it to you. Now, scenarios help us show what our values look like under different conditions or in essentially different scenarios. So it kind of helps you visualize what your numbers are going to look like if a certain scenario occurs. So let's set the scene here so you understand what we're trying to do. Now, here I have just a basic monthly budget. So I've got at the top here my monthly income. I then have all of my monthly expenses, so things like rent, travel, the utilities, all of those kinds of things. I then have my total expenses, which is essentially a calculation. You can see there in the formula bar, I'm just summing B3 to B9. And then I have the amount left. And again, that's just a very simple calculation of B1, so my monthly income, minus my expenses. And that tells me how much money I'm going to have left over at the end of every month. Now, to make this a little bit clearer to see, and if any of you attended the last webinar that I did, I speak a lot about cell styles. So the way that I've colored these, I've just done this using cell styles. Now, if you've never used them before, you'll find them on the home ribbon underneath cell styles here. And I've basically colored these as input cells. So this is where we're going to input our numbers. And then these cells here that contain formulas, I've just made calculation cells. Now, this is purely formatting, and it just really helps your spreadsheet be a little bit more readable if you kind of separate out what cells are input cells, what cells are calculations, so on and so forth. Now, what we're going to do here is this is my current budget. Now, what if I want to see what my overall budget is going to look like if I take that promotion that my manager keeps trying to get me to go for? I then might want to see what my monthly budget looks like if I decide to go for that new job that I've been eyeing up. Or I may want to see what my financial situation is going to look like if I decide to go out on my own as a freelancer. So essentially, I've got 4 different scenarios there, and I really want to use Scenario Manager to kind of make it really easy for me to see which one's going to be best for me financially, okay? So we're going to set up a whole bunch of different scenarios and view all of those different situations. So we're going to go back up to our data ribbon. We're going to go across to WhatIf Analysis, and I'm going to select Scenario Manager. And you'll get this sort of pop-up just here. And we now need to add in some of our scenarios. So I'm going to click Add. And the first thing I would always recommend you do is that you create a scenario called Original, which will just have your original scenario or what we're looking at here. So you can always go back to it if things go a little bit wrong. So I'm going to call this Original. And it's asking me, what are the changing cells? So if I was to get a promotion, let's say, what out of this is going to change? Well, my monthly income might change. Maybe if I get a promotion, I'm going to be earning more money. So this cell might change. But if I'm earning more money, then maybe I'm going out on the town a little bit more. So this figure might change. Or maybe I might be shopping more if I've got more spare cash at the end of the month. So this figure might change. So my changing cells are really going to be my monthly income, and it could be any of these, okay? So in this changing cells area, I'm going to select monthly income. I'm then going to hold down my control key, and I'm going to select the rest of these cells. These other cells at the bottom, totals and amount left, these are dependent on these. So these are calculations which will just update depending on what's going on up here. Okay, so these are the only cells that are going to be changing. And I'm going to click on OK. So now it's telling me enter values for each of these changing cells. Now, one thing that's not very helpful here is that you can see 3,000, that is my monthly income, 1,200, that's my rent. But in this scenario manager, it's just showing me the cell reference. So it's not particularly meaningful. It's quite hard for me to say straight away what this 150 is because it just says cell B4. It doesn't mean a great deal. I prefer it if I have next to each of these cells the actual thing that they refer to. So I want the top one to say monthly income, the next one to say rent, the next one to say travel, so on and so forth. So before I do this, I'm actually going to name these ranges so that this is more meaningful. Okay, so I'm going to cancel out of here. We're going to come back to that in a moment. And let me close that down. Now, a quick way of naming these, and essentially what I want to do is I want to name cell B1 monthly income. I want this cell to be called rent. I want this cell to be called travel. And we can do this by naming ranges, and we can do it very quickly. All I need to do is highlight, and I'm going to hold down my control key to do the rest of these, like so. So I'm essentially highlighting what I want them labeled and the value. I'm going to go up to formulas, and in this define names group, I'm going to say create from selection. So it says it's going to create names from values, and it's already selected for me left column. So essentially it's saying, do you want me to name these cells based on what's in that left column? Which is correct. So I'm going to say, OK. So now all of these cells are named with these labels. And I can double check that by clicking on my name box just above, which is where all of your named ranges are held. And you can see that I now have those ranges set up in there. So now when we go back into our scenario manager through WhatIf Analysis, and I say add, and we're going to do original. By changing cells, let's delete that out. B1, going to hold down control, select those changing cells and click on OK. And now these are named. It's a lot easier for me to see what they are. Okay, so that's a little tip in there. Name those cells. Now, this is the original scenario. I don't want anything to change here, so I'm going to say OK. So that's my first scenario set up. I'm going to add another one. Now, this scenario is going to be for if I take that promotion that Adam is so generously offering me. And my changing cells are going to stay the same, so it's going to be the same cells. I'm going to click on OK. But now I can change these values. So if I get a promotion, maybe that means I'm going to be earning more. So I'm going to change that to 3,000 2,500. Now, if I'm earning more, a lot of these are going to stay the same. So my rent's going to be the same, travel, because I'm not changing jobs, I'm just getting a promotion. But I might decide that I'm going to do a little bit more shopping than I normally do because I've got more disposable money. Maybe I'm going to go out a little bit more as well. So I'm going to change that to 400. I'm going to click on OK. So I have two different scenarios now. Let's add another one. And this one is going to be called New Job. Changing cells are still the same. I'm going to click on OK. Now, if I take that new job is quite a bit more money. So that's going to be 4,000 a month I'm going to have coming in. The problem here is that that new job is a little bit further away. So I'm going to have to spend more on travel. So I'm going to be spending, let's say, 300 a month on travel. And I do have a little bit more money, so I'm going to, let's say, 275, just to account for my additional travel. And I'm going to keep going out at 350 and click on OK. Let's add one more scenario. Let's click Add. And this time, what if I decide just to go out on my own as a freelancer? Well, I'm going to have to be a little bit careful while my business gets started. So my monthly income is going to be a little bit lower. It's going to be 2,500. My travel, well, I'm now working from home. I'm a freelancer. I don't have to travel anywhere, just to my lounge from my bedroom. That's going to be 0. My utilities, well, I'm actually going to put a lot of my utilities on my expenses. So let's put that down a bit to 200. And shopping, I'm going to try and be a bit more conservative when it comes to shopping, just while my business is getting going. So I'm going to say 150 there for shopping. Okay. And click on OK. So very quickly, I've set up 4 different scenarios, which is going to enable me to see really easily what these different scenarios or what my financial situation is going to look like depending on each of these scenarios. Now, one way I can look at this is I can switch between them. So if I want to look at the details for the promotion, I can select it. And at the bottom, I have a show button. And you'll see as soon as I click it, these numbers are going to change. So let's say show. All right, so I can now see that if I take that promotion, the amount of money I have left at the end of the month is 980, which is a lot better than what I'm doing now. What about if I take that new job? How much money am I going to have left? Let's see. Ooh, a lot better off. That's looking good to me so far. But what about freelancing? Let's see. Ooh, that's really not very good. So I can see there that for financial reasons, taking the new job is probably going to be my best option. Now that's all well and good, and I'm going to set this back to the original. But I don't want to have to keep switching between those different scenarios to see them. What would be really useful would be to have some kind of table which does a direct comparison between all of the scenarios that I have set up. And we can do that by clicking on this summary button at the bottom. And I'm going to select to do a scenario summary. It's also worth noting you could do a pivot table report from this as well if you wanted to. But for now, we're going to do a scenario summary. I'm going to click on OK. And you can see it puts them side by side. So it's showing me my current values, the original, the promotion, new job, and freelance. And I can see all my totals at the bottom there. Now, one thing you might also notice here is something that we didn't do. Can you see here, result cells? It's showing me the cell reference. It's not saying amount left. Now, if I wanted that to say amount left, what I would need to do would be to go back and name this range. Like we did with the rest of these, we'd want to name that the same way that we did these. Okay, and then you'll have the word amount left at the bottom there as opposed to the cell reference. Okay. So that is kind of how scenario summary works. As I said, a really basic example, but you can do this on financial figures, lots of different scenarios that you can set up. So hopefully you can kind of see how that might be useful in certain situations that you work on. Wonderful. Now I'm going to just delete that like so. All right, so that is Scenario Manager. Now, the next one that we have to look at in here is data tables. Now, when it comes to data tables, there are two different kinds of data tables you can create. You can create what we call a one variable data table or a two variable data table. And these are sometimes better than creating scenarios because you can create a data table to quickly try out different values for formulas. So again, this is one that's a lot easier to understand if you see it in action. Now, as you can see here, we are going to do our good old favorite PMT. As I said, it does work very well with WhatIf analysis tools. We're going to do another PMT calculation up here. Now, I'm going to do this a slightly different way. Instead of just typing it into the cell, I'm going to jump into my functions dialog box just by clicking on this FX to insert a function. I'm going to do a quick search up here for PMT and click on Go. I'm going to double click to select it. Now, I will say that if you're not all that familiar with working with formulas and functions, I know a lot of people who find using this dialog box a lot easier when it comes to constructing their formulas as opposed to just typing them into the cell. So I thought I'd throw it in this way as well, just so you can see how that works if you're not too familiar. Now we have our same arguments just here. So our rate this time is our interest rate just here. So that is yearly. So we need to divide it by 12 because we're working out a monthly payment. And number of payments here is 30 months. So I'm going to select this cell just there. And then our present value is our loan amount. And remember, if we want this to come out as a positive number, we need to put a minus figure in front of that loan amount and click on OK. So that's telling me that for these conditions, my monthly payment is going to be $342.01. So let's take a look at this in a data table. So basically what I want to do here is I want to see what my monthly payment is going to be for multiple different interest rates. So I'm going to list out some interest rates here starting at 1% all the way through to roughly 3%. And I want to see what my monthly payment is going to be if against all of those different interest rates. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to type in interest rate at the top here. I'm going to start out at 1, so let's do 1.00%. So, and then we're going to go up in small incrementals. So now once you've typed in two of them, if I highlight both, Excel will recognize the pattern. So I can use my little autofill handle. I can drag it down. You can see as I'm dragging down, it's going down in those incrementals of 0.25. So I can drag all the way down for however many I need. Now what I need to do, and this may seem a little bit strange first of all, so bear with me. I need to have my current monthly payment in this cell just here. And the reason why you put it there is because when you do a data table, you need to be able to highlight essentially your interest rate. You need to be able to highlight it like that in a square. So you need to have what it's going to use as its input within that data table. So I'm going to link to my monthly payment equals and select the cell, press enter. And that's just doing a straight link from this table up here. So now what I can do is I can highlight everything, go up to WhatIf Analysis, down to Data Table, and we get this little option just here. Now, as I said, this is a one variable data table because we're just using one variable, which is this here, the interest rate. And this interest rate is running down in the column. So the only one I need to fill out here is the column input cell. So it's saying, okay, what is the input cell? Well, the input cell is the interest rate. So in here, I need to select the interest rate from the table above and click on OK. And now it gives me everything I need. Now I need to do a little bit of formatting here. I'm going to highlight these. I'm going to go to the home ribbon and I'm going to add the currency symbol like so. Okay, so now I can see that if the interest rate is 1.75%, I'm going to be paying $340.92 every single month. All right, and I can just do a quick visual check to make sure that this is correct, because up here I can see that with an interest rate at 2%, If we go down to here, it should be 342.01, which it is in this data table. Okay. Now, another little trick here, if you've got this link cell at the top here, it doesn't look particularly great. If you want to hide that little link cell at the top, there is a quick shortcut way that you can do this. Now, there's a shortcut key, which I hope is going to work when I'm on a call, because sometimes my function keys don't work. I'm going to try it. Control F1. No, that doesn't seem to work. Just bear with me. No, it doesn't seem to like that very much at all. So I'm going to have to do it the manual way. If we right-click and go down to Format Cells, what you can do is jump across to Custom, and in this type area, I'm going to type in 3 semicolons. 1, 2, 3. Click on OK, and that will hide that link cell from your data table. So it just makes it look a little bit neater. It's still there, so when you click on it, if you look up in the formula bar, you can see it says equals B6. You're just not seeing it in your data table. What I might do then is just apply some basic formatting. So I'm going to select my data table. I'm just going to give it some borders. I might want to center everything. And another thing that's quite nice to do is I might want to add something like conditional formatting in here as well. So I'm going to highlight these numbers. I'm going to jump up to conditional formatting, and I'm just going to add some color scales. And again, you don't have to do this, but it's just quite a nice way of representing the numbers in your data table. So in this selection that we've made, the highest number is in red and the lowest number is in blue. All right, so it just makes your data look a little bit more interesting. So that is how you would use a one input data table. Let's jump across to our next example, which is using 2 inputs. So in the previous example, we just had 1 input running down in the column, but now we have 2 inputs that we need to use in this data table. Now again, I have a little PMT calculation that I'm going to do up here. So I'm going to use my functions dialog box again. I'm going to double click to select PMT. I'm going to do the same thing. So my rate here, yearly, divide by 12 to make it monthly. Now my number of payments, so this is the term. Now this is slightly different in this example. So here the term is years, 30 years. Now I'm working out monthly. So for this one, I need to do B4 multiplied by 12. And then my present value is the loan amount. And again, I need to put a minus sign on the front if I want to make that positive. And click on OK. So my monthly payment, and this might be on something like a house, that's what this kind of setup looks like. My monthly payment is going to be 1,264. I have the wrong currency formatted there, so let's just change that. There we go. So now I'm going to do exactly the same thing, but we're doing 2 inputs this time. So again, we need to link to our input. So that is equals B5. Enter. Now I can highlight the entire table, go up to the data ribbon and across to WhatIf Analysis, and I'm going to say data table. Now because we have 2 inputs this time, I need to fill in both the row input cell and the column input cell. So our row input cell is this running across the row. So this is going to be the interest rate. So I need to select that from our table at the top. And then our column input, this is the loan amount in this case. So I select that from my input table. Click on OK. And there we go. And again, you're probably going to want to do some tidying up here. I'm going to add some symbols like so. And again, you could do some really cool conditional formatting if you wanted to. Once again, you could go in and hide this. So just to recap how you hide the input cell, if we right click, go down to Format Cells, I'm going to click on Custom Formatting, and I'm going to do 3 semicolons, like so. Okay, so that is a 1 variable data table and a 2 variable data table. Quite a lot to take in. and get your head around. Again, these come with practice. Just have a little practice, play around with them. Now, the final thing I want to show you, and this is really the final what-if analysis tool. There's only really 4 of them. 3 of them we've already seen, but the final one is Solver. Now, if you look on my data ribbon, you'll see that I have my Solver tool in this Analyze group at the end. Now, as I mentioned, if you're looking at your Excel right now and you're looking on your data ribbon and thinking to yourself, I can't see Solver anywhere, don't worry, it's not installed by default. It is an add-in that you need to turn on if you're going to use it. So let's deal with that first of all. If you need to turn this on, if you jump to File, go all the way down to Options, and you'll find all of your add-ins under this Add-ins section. And you can see here at the top, I have my Solver add-in installed. So what you'll find is that you will see Solver add-in listed somewhere in here. And all you do is select it and you can install it that way. It's a very simple process. Once you've done that, you will then see it appear on your data ribbon. Now, what Solver is it's kind of like a more advanced version of Goal Seek. So if we just go back to Goal Seek for 1 second, when we were doing these examples here, when we were utilizing Goal Seek, and I'm just going to bring that up just here, we were basically setting this cell to 500 and saying change one of these other cells. Now, the limitations with Goal Seek is that you can only change one cell. So I could either change the amount that I'm borrowing, or I could change the term, the number of months I'm borrowing over, but I couldn't change both of them. Okay, that is where Solver comes in, because it allows you to essentially change multiple cells, and you can also do things like add in constraints as well. So let me show you how it works. Let's jump back to Solver. Now, I will say a lot of people tend to shy away from Solver because they think it's incredibly complicated, and it really isn't once you start using it. So I'm going to try and explain this in the easiest way possible. Now, I have a very basic scenario up here. This is some concert ticket sales. So I can see at the top here, it says tickets sold, 2,500, price per ticket, $30, revenue, 75,000. So this is for a concert. If I sell these at this price, that is how much revenue I'm going to make. And you can see there up in the formula bar, it says B3 multiplied by B4. Okay, so I'm multiplying these two together to get my amount of revenue. Now, there are some associated costs per each ticket. So that might be things like paying for the artist, lighting, all of those kinds of things. So the fixed costs per ticket are $10. So the total costs, B3, so it's the total number of tickets times the cost per ticket, and that gives me 25,000. So my profit is essentially my revenue minus my costs, which gives me a total of 50,000. So what we're going to do is we're going to set up a scenario. We're going to use Solver to help work a few things out for us. So I'm going to click on Solver up here. You can see I was doing this earlier. Let me just minus these out. So what we're going to say here is the first thing we need to do is set our objective. So I might say that I need to make a profit of $60,000. Okay, so my objective is that this cell is going to be set to the value of 60,000. That is what I'm aiming for. Okay, again, you can see, let me just delete that out. There we go. All right, so now I need to say which cells are going to be changing. Now, what I'm going to say here is that I want this to change to 60,000 profit, but my cost per ticket, that's kind of set. I can't really change how many costs I incur per ticket. So I'm not going to change this cell. Now, some things I can change here is I want to see how many tickets I would need to sell in order to make a profit of 60,000. And I also want to see what the cost of those tickets are going to be in order for me to make a profit of 60,000. So my changing cells are going to be tickets sold. I'm going to hold down Control and select price per ticket. Now let's just solve this to see what it does. So there we go. So you can see now it's changed my profit to 60,000 and it's changed these two cells at the top. So now I can see that in order to make that much profit, I need to sell 2,648 tickets at a price of $33. All right. Now that's all well and good. That might be exactly what I'm looking for. But you can take this a step further when you're using Solver by adding in certain constraints. So it might be that I look at this and I say to myself, well, I've been told by the venue that they just can't sell tickets over $30. So I'm going to make a modification to my solver and add in that constraint. Now I'm going to cancel out of here so it goes back to how it was. I'm going to click on solver again. My objective is still the same. I want this cell, B10, to be 60,000. I'm going to change these two cells so I can leave this as it was because it's just picking up the values I had in there from last time. But I'm going to add in a constraint. And you can see underneath, this is where you can add in different constraints. So I'm going to say add. Now my constraint here is that the price per ticket, so this cell here, has to be less than or equal to 30. Can't be greater than $30. I'm going to say OK. And if I wanted to, I could go through and I can add in more and more constraints. And that might be something that you want to do depending on the problem that it is that you're trying to solve. But I just kind of really wanted to introduce Solver to you at this stage. So we're not going to go too complex in the time that we have. But we have our constraint in there. I'm going to say solve. And there we go. So now I can see my profit is 60,000. My cost hasn't changed, which is good because that's fixed. My price per ticket is $30, but I now need to sell 3,000 tickets. Okay, so it's worked out all of those little problems for me, including those constraints. And I'm going to say OK to that. All right, that is pretty much it, guys. We've got about 10 minutes or so left. So this is a little bit of a shorter webinar than we normally have because there's only a few things related to WhatIf analysis tools. But hopefully that's been enough examples for you at least to get started, have a play around, maybe try it out on some of your data as well. So what I'm going to do now is I am going to open it up to questions. So Adam, if there's any questions that have come in while I've been chit-chatting away, then please feel free.
There hasn't been actually, Debs, as yet. If anybody has any questions, then do pop them in the box. I think Jean and Lorna both saying that these functions are very new to them, so they'll definitely give them a go. I just had I've never used Solver before,
Yes,
and yeah, that looks brilliant. I just had a quick look at how many constraints it can handle because I was intrigued, and actually it's 200. So if you've got a really complex scenario in mind where multiple things can change and you've got multiple constraints that you need to add in, you think trying to get your head around doing something like that manually with formulas and stuff like that would just be it could take you a whole day basically.
Exactly.
Whereas this you can just enter your constraints and Excel does the heavy lifting. So yeah, I love Solver, brilliant. The other ones are great as well, but I didn't realize how powerful Solver was in Excel.
I know it tends to be one that you don't see people talk about that much. I don't know whether that's because it's kind of an add-in, so some people forget that it's actually there. And yeah, I don't see too many things online about it either. So I just thought I would throw that one in at the end because it is really powerful, as you said, in different situations, especially that constraints facility. So it can be really helpful instead of trying to work out all the formulas. So definitely one to have a little research on because we've really just scratched the surface with it today because we don't have a great deal of time. But I just kind of really wanted to show you the kinds of things that it can do. So if that is something that interests you, you can go away, watch some YouTube videos, have a little research.
Yeah, definitely. I'm thinking we should probably be adding more of this type of content as well. I know we touch on this a little bit in our advanced course, goal seek and things like that, but I don't think we cover Solver at the moment. So maybe that's something we should look at.
Or a blog post. It's quite a good blog post as well.
Yeah, big time. Loads of ideas. Right. So thanks. Most people just saying thank you. I'm glad everybody found this useful today. Thank you so much for attending. It's always lovely to have everyone come along. Someone has just asked, can you go back and show how you highlighted the columns in Scenario Manager, in the Scenario Manager?
Yes. Okay, let's go back to here.
My other favorite, while Deb's is doing that, my other favorite hack, those 3 semicolons.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. I'd have just turned the text white or something like that. But that's obviously
that old trick. I know.
Yeah,
a lot of people do that to make text disappear.
Amateur trick.
It's an amateur move, Adam. Amateur.
Just about sums up my Excel.
Yeah, those 3 semicolons. I actually didn't know that for a long time, but I did see someone do it online a while ago, and I thought, remember that, because that's actually really useful for hiding things in a cell if you don't want them to appear on the worksheet. So yeah, really good little trick there. All right, so we're talking about, so I'm assuming that you're talking about when we named these cells. Is that what you're talking about when we were using the name manager? So what I did to name these is I just highlighted across both. I held down my control key and then highlighted the others like so. And then all I did was I named those ranges. So I went to formulas, create from selection, and then I want these cells named by whatever is in the left column. So I just selected that, click on OK, and it will name those cells. I believe that's what you were talking about. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. Yeah, for naming cells by the look of it. Yeah, that's right. And that's another little hack as well. If you're not using control in that way, that Deb's did a few times today. So if you want to highlight a big load of cells, you can use Shift and then click wherever you need to use. But actually, if you want to highlight individual cells that aren't next to each other, you use Control. And something that Excel introduced not long ago is that you can unhighlight using Control as well. You never used to be able to do that. So if you highlight some different cells using Control, you can now click on individual ones to unhighlight them as well, which is quite cool. Excel only started letting you do that last year. It was a 2019 introduction. So if you're on an older version, it might not have worked. But
selecting cells is, I mean, I always forget that people sometimes aren't sure about all the different selections that you can do in Excel. But yeah, I mean, obviously we all know the click and drag to select our cells. If we want to, as Adam said, utilize the Shift key, I can select this cell. And then if I go over here, hold down Shift and click, it's basically going to highlight that entire block. If I want to highlight what we call non-contiguous cells, so that means cells that are not next to each other, that is when we would use Control. So if I select here, hold down Control, I can then select, so on and so forth. And as Adam said, you can now click back on them to deselect them if you're holding down the Control key. So with this over here, I couldn't just click and drag because it's going to include this blank row in there as well, which is why I can do the first one, hold down Control, and then I can select the other ones. So just a few little highlighting, selecting cells, shortcut tips.
Brilliant. That's great. Thanks, Debs. Loads of useful bits of information, and hopefully all those little things will save you guys lots of time in your spreadsheets. Next month, we are back, of course, in June with a webinar on Microsoft Word this time. We're actually moving away from Excel into one of Deb's other favorites, Word. And yeah, we're going to be covering some of the more advanced features of Word that maybe make your documents look that little bit more professional. So some exciting things there. Do you want to say a little bit about what we're going to cover there, Debs? Or
well, I haven't designed the webinar yet, Adam, so I'm not sure what I'm going to throw into that one.
I think
could be anything.
We've talked about stuff like contents pages, indexes, all that kind of stuff. So basically stuff that makes
contents, all of that kind of stuff. So if you're somebody who works on documents, they don't even have to be particularly long, but it is particularly useful if you work on long documents, how to kind of make them look really good. So adding things like cover pages, table of contents pages, making sure you know how to keep those things updated, maybe adding in indexes, all of that kind of stuff, cross-referencing, some of the more advanced features in Word. Because I think when it comes to Word, a lot of people think, oh, it's really easy. And for the most part, most things are reasonably easy in Word, but there's definitely a few things in there which are a little bit trickier. So we're going to be covering all of that kind of stuff. So definitely one to come to if you work with documents.
Yeah, big time. And again, that should be full of stuff that you wish you sort of knew how to do, but have never taken the time to sort of find out. So we'll cover all of that in an hour in June.
Yes.
So yeah, very good answer considering I put you on the spot there, Debs.
I know.
Good stuff. You've got to cover all those things next month now, otherwise you're not going to be happy.
I know. So my brain's all over the place. It's a lockdown madness. That's what I call it.
Yeah, well, you've not looked up from your computer screen in about 3.5 months, have you?
I know.
Great. Okay, guys, we'll leave it there so Debs can go have a much needed glass of wine.
Yeah.
And then we'll see you all next month. I'll get the recording and this data sheet that Debs has been working on up on the blog and emailed out to everybody in the next couple of days. So that'll be coming your way as well, so you can practice with this data sheet. Thank you so much for attending, everybody, and we will we'll see you in June.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, everyone. Bye. Have a good day.
Bye.
Bye.